Time to go from low code to full code. Now, that's a bit of a weird video title for a channel that seemingly talks only about low code. Now, hear me out, because this video might actually change your mind a little bit. It's definitely changed mine a little bit. Now, we're looking at 4 things in this video that kind of explain the title a little bit. So, mostly, how not all the time you think you save with low-code tools might actually be saved. How coding is not the hard part under certain conditions. How you can reap a lot of benefits if you go from low-code to full code, and how you can get started. Now, this doesn't apply to everyone. This applies to a subset of people who use low-code. And if you're one of those, well, there's only one thing you can do. You can watch the rest of the video. Firstly, let's really quickly agree on what I talk about when I say low-code tools. Low-code tools for me, it's Flutterflow, it's Webflow, it's weweb. It's those 3 big players. There are many others, but those are the ones I mostly have experience with. And what differentiates them from no-code tools are basically 2 things. The first thing we've got code export. That's pretty simple. You get your code out of the tool. And the second one is you can add custom code. This is what I talked about when I talked about Flutterflow and Cursor. You can do things that make them more customizable than what you could achieve with the visual editor. So I found myself to mostly be stuffing a lot of holes, because you get to a point where your project is almost done, but then your client or you need something very custom. You normally leave it up to the end, and now you basically have to, well, stuff a hole. And you do that by using custom code, which isn't something bad, but you're doing it inside an environment that makes it difficult to debug your code and to make it working in the first place. The second thing is, when you get more and more and more experience, you suddenly realize lots and lots of things are much faster by simply using code in the first place. Now, I did a video on this where I showed how you can use Cursor AI to, for example, calculate calendar days. That's exactly what I mean. I wouldn't want to go into the action flow editor of Flutterflow and try to get this in a visual editor. I'd want to get it done quickly with custom code. If you are at that point where you use a lot of custom code and where you code a lot, basically there's one question remaining, which is, why not switch to full code permanently? I was at that point before 2 years ago, and I didn't do the switch because things were different from today. And now I want to talk about why it isn't as hard as it was 2 years ago to get started, and that there are a lot of unexpected things you can benefit from. Now, why is it easier than it was 2 years ago for me? Well, for one, if you are at this point where you use a lot of code with low-code tools, well, you know how to build a product. So to get a product up and running, you don't just have one thing, you have lots of moving parts. You have your database, you have your APIs, you request certain information, you have your backend. You basically at this point know how to fit things together. So it turns out that this is, I think, a really great preparation for the future and brings you a long way. And quite often, things are similar. So this means, for example, in Webflow, a lot of the terms you use are just the HTML terms or the CSS terms that are already there. So you kind of know the terms already. You can just use them in a faster way in direct code instead of fiddling around in the editor. And the thing that I find, and you will not be surprised by this, which changed a lot of things massively, is AI. Now, AI, because with Cursor, you basically have your own tutor, yeah? You have a tutor you can ask as much as you want. You can ask them the silliest question, you can ask them to drill down to how something really works. And 2 years ago, that would have taken you a lot of time to get all those details, if you got them at all. Now, you've got someone you can pester all the time. One important thing about this is, of course, you have to use it in the right way, and I will talk about how you can use AI in the right way to teach you later on in the video. And lastly, you have a huge community. We talk a lot about how low-code communities can be great, but think much, much bigger. Basically, all the problems you encounter have already been encountered. Let's look at the benefits now. I've put down 6 benefits and I want to talk through each and every one of them. The first one, control and customize. Now, control and customize is a pretty obvious one. You can go much deeper and change things. Now, let's look at some practical examples of what I mean. Number one, say you have a nice webflow page. Yes, let's look at my humble example. You built yourself a webflow page. It's working well, but at some point you or your client decides, well, I also want to add a price somewhere. Now, at this point, things get difficult because in full code, you could just go ahead in your code and say something like flat.price. Okay, now from the flat object, you get the price. Can I do that here? This is a static page builder. You can throw a little bit on top, and you could do this either by putting Wiz on top, which at this point, as you can see here, in a second, you basically already add quite a bit of code. Or you could alternatively go ahead and build it in something else. And this is something I sometimes do, and which I've done an experiment on this project, is I built a booking portal. And this is a Flutterflow app, and the main page is a Webflow app. Now, next thing is about customizability. You cannot easily add some things. Say your customer wants for Stripe to open the same page. They want a Stripe embed, and they don't want the usual thing of clicking on a button and being redirected. Now, have fun doing that. That's going to be a tough one, and you're going to spend a hell of a lot of time to go through this. If you did it in full code, it would be really simple and well explained. Now, the other thing, which is why it takes so long, is, well, debugging just takes a lot of time. You can find errors much more easily if you just have the code. And oftentimes, the code or the errors are being shown to you by tools built into Cursor or Visual Studio. Is already there. Now, thirdly, you are not in a niche as much. You're not learning Webflow. You're not learning Flutterflow. You're learning React, and React runs a lot of the internet. And by learning React, you are learning JavaScript, or as I would recommend, TypeScript on top of that. You have a much more applicable skill and can probably more easily find customers, and also can more easily work somewhere if you ever decide to go away from freelancing, or if you want to reorientate yourself in a job. Now, next thing is you have lower cost, because let's think about it. If I go ahead and I build my page with Next.js, which is a framework built on top of React, I can deploy this on Vercel, and well, it's free. I'm not going to pay anything unless I get a really big page, and I can put whatever features I want on there, and they're free. The only thing I might pay for is the custom domain. Now, this is quite different when you look at something like Webflow. Now, you start with your basic page to get a custom domain. Otherwise, you have the Webflow domain, which really is often not good. You pay $14 already per month. And only if you go for yearly. If you go for monthly, well, $18 it is. Suddenly you decide you want to have a blog on there. Well, now you're $29 a month for a feature that's easy and free to add on something like Next.js. Say you want to have localization. Well, you're going to pay for that. Same for analysis and optimize. You're going to pay for many things because of the abstraction that sometimes makes things just more difficult. So think about it, maybe save that. Another tool is something like BuildShip. You can build APIs in minutes with a drag and drop interface, and you can get stuff up and running. But if you want to have an API endpoint, you can easily build it somewhere else or inside your next step, and you're not going to pay for it. Over here, you go ahead and, well, if you want to have more than 5 active flows, you're going to look at $19 a month with the annual discount, 25, just like this. Okay, so we've covered cost. Now, the next thing is AI. And AI is a bit of a special thing because AI, for one, it's a great tutor. If you use it the right way, you want to use AI so that you ask it stuff and maybe you think about, what is a big plan of approach to a project, but you want to code yourself. Otherwise, if you just prompt it, it's not going to help you. You're not going to learn. If you had a teacher at school and they would just provide the answer for you, well, you're not going to learn. You only use that as a sort of last resort if you really have to get out of a pickle. Now, the next thing you have, and which I call properly use AI, well, you have your V0s, you have your Replit agents, you have all sorts of tools that can help you get started and do some interesting things. And the problem is, if you just rely on prompting things, the following thing will happen. Let me just show it here with a little graph. Okay, let's put it like this. Let's draw a little graph. Okay, now let's say this is the progress you're making with your app, and this is the number of prompts. Now, what you will find is you will make a lot of progress at the beginning. It's really fast. But then at some point, the AI decides to put something in there which neither you nor the AI understands, and suddenly you go down here. Your app's broken. Your AI will not solve it. Whatever you do, it keeps on putting weird stuff in there and keeps on breaking. Now, this will happen over and over again as your project gets more complex. Now, the big advantage if you know how to code is, at this point, you fix it yourself and you back up. Now, you can use some more AI for prompting. It will probably break at some point again, but you can keep getting it up. You understand what's going on under the hood, and you can really, really use AI tools. Now, lastly, it's probably better for you and your clients because you can offer more stuff and you can implement stuff for clients or for your own app or project that you could not have done before. Let's look at the next point. Next point being, well, how would you get started? And let me tell you. Now, again, I am assuming that you are at a point where you know a bit of coding. You're not a complete newbie. Now, if you are at this point, there's a couple of things I would learn. The way I started was I wanted to get better at web applications because I get annoyed by webflow and I wanted to build proper web applications. Not so much mobile applications, they can be tackled later on, but I want to get started with this because that's what most of my customers want, most of my clients want, and this is also how I validate ideas. For this, I wanted to go with something that's big, that's well known. So I went for React, and React is a library, and it is based on JavaScript. Now, to get started with JavaScript or with TypeScript, and I'm not going to go into the depths of where the difference is, I would go with something like NetNinja. This guy is really awesome. He's a guy from Britain and he's really good at explaining stuff. And the best thing is his courses aren't expensive. TypeScript Masterclass, $11.90. That is affordable. And you can check if you like his courses. You can go ahead onto his page and he's often put a few first videos in, like 12 videos. You can take a look at them. It's a crash course. See if it helps you. But I found him to be absolutely amazing. He's also got stuff on Next and React, really helpful. Now, Next you can do React, and I would recommend, do a little quick start. They offer, React has a good solution. Get a quick start and then get going. And once you got a little accustomed to this, you want to go to Next.js, which is the framework, which helps a lot to get your React app running much faster, which is why React themselves are recommending starting with Next.js. There's a little button up here that says learn, and they've got a really, really nice little learning chapter. You build something like this, and it doesn't take long. It takes you a day to understand, and then you've got your 16 chapters, and you're done. And if you want to go and look into React again, I think there's a little React. Let's check. Yeah, Learn React Foundations. There you go. There's something like this as well. Now, personally, I think that's all you need. Because you need to get started a little bit, you need to know what this is about, but you don't want to go into this tutorial trap. You don't spend 40 hours buying a course to learn React. You're not going to do it. You need to learn small things. You need to build something, and then you just need to get going. And if you don't know how to get going, well, you've got your tutor. You know, ask AI. Say, okay, I'm at this point. From a high-end perspective, how can we continue? This brings us towards the end. Is this channel going to be about? Well, I'm not fully probably gonna stop doing stuff about low code because sometimes it is very useful, but I'm gonna do a lot about, well, how to go from low code to full code. And if that's interesting to you, by all means, subscribe. Let me know what you think about the whole thing, if you need any follow-up videos. And yeah, that's going to be the new focus of this channel.